Hi folks, I'm Joe Duffy, CEO of OffshoreInsiders.com. It's been a little while since I spoke to you, not because I don't love you, but in my 45 years, and yes, I know I look a lot younger, but the truth is I am 45 years old. Don't think I've had a cough that has stuck with me this long. I can't say it's completely gone. I'll try to get through this video, but we've got a very important topic for baseball handicappers, and that is comparing WHIP to ERA. Now, if you're a baseball fan, quite frankly, you probably know what ERA is. WHIP, which is walk and hits per innings pitch, is something that's really become in vogue in the last 10 years or so. And those of you who play fantasy baseball, rotisserie baseball, you've become more and more familiar with it. Probably of all the baseball handicapping arguments and discussions I've had with wise guys, sharp players, professional gamblers over the year, there's nothing that incites more passion than when you debate the importance of ERA or WHIP. Much like a political discussion, one of the biggest problems is there's always somebody taking an extreme. Somebody says, oh, WHIP is so much more important, blah, blah, blah. Another person will say ERA is so much more important. So you ask me, which one is the more important? I say both. It's much like going to the doctor and saying, hey, doc, what's more important, diet or exercise? The answer is both. Now, if we did have to single out one or the other, WHIP would be a little bit more important, at least 60-40, maybe a little bit more like 65-35. But the reasons that we do weigh WHIP a little more heavily, I told you folks, still getting over that cough, having a little trouble getting through this, but it's very important. So I think we can, get through and have a fairly good broadcast on this one. ERA benefits a little bit more from good fortune, where WHIP isn't quite as susceptible to the little ballpark dichotomies where a ballpark can change, say, a fly ball into a home run, or another ballpark, it can change a home run into a fly ball. But with WHIP, a walk is a walk in just about any ballpark. A line drive single is a line drive single in just about any ballpark. Now, I do realize in those examples I gave where a home run does turn into a fly ball or vice versa, that will affect WHIP, but not nearly as much as the ERA can vary from ballpark to ballpark. Another thing is sometimes ERA is a benefit of good fortune. We've looked it up. I actually thought that maybe Greg Maddux, a guy who's always been good at getting the ground ball, stranding runners, would be an example of a guy who probably had a WHIP that may not have been quite as good, but an ERA that is better. But the truth is, after looking at numbers, year in, year out, throughout the years, there is no pitcher who's been successful by making the art of stranding runners. So in other words, if a guy is a good pitcher, a successful pitcher, over the long term, is not going to have a bad WHIP. Now, another disadvantage of ERA is we don't like the way that Major League defines an earned run. For example, just to oversimplify, a pitcher could get the first two guys out, and then the third batter gets on an error, and then the pitcher could give up 9 runs after that. But baseball considers those unearned runs. So even when we take into account unearned runs, in reality, we take into account runs. We look at the ERA, and then we see if he's given up a disproportionate of unearned runs. But WHIP is something that takes that very much into account. Another thing that you have to realize, the odds makers are always one step ahead of the gambler, and especially the square player. The odds maker is more than aware that the public, even though the public is becoming more and more educated in every single sport, the Johnny-come-lately, the Johnny Bag of Donuts or Joey Bag of Donuts is going to be much more likely to look at ERA. So a pitcher who actually has a very good WHIP but doesn't have quite as good of an ERA because of some bad fortune, the player with a good WHIP is going to be much more likely to sneak under the radar, and you're going to give good value on that. Now, I also know that some people who use the opponent's OPS, which is on-base percentage, plus slugging percentage, and now that is available for pitchers. Very, very similar to WHIP as well. But ultimately, ERA corroborates WHIP, and WHIP corroborates ERA. But in the old WHIP versus ERA argument, still at least 60-40 towards the WHIP. And that's why we are the most successful website ever. OffshoreInsiders.com. Even those of you who say, I've never got to pay a handicapper for his picks, check out our free information that we have there. We've got game previews, exclusive free news and notes, and more. And we feature some of the best handicappers in the business. Stevie Vincent. You may remember me from my tailgate party days. Look, I've been in this business a long time, long before the internet was here. I was a score phone legend. You probably remember me as JD of the ACC. Used to do those morning tailgate parties, which were the industry standard. Every single sharp player used to call them on the score phones before the internet. Stevie Vincent was our executive editor. We got Matt Rivers, who was the #1 handicapper on another site before he finally decided to come to the show. Master Lock Line, that traces its roots back to the Super Lock Line score phone days. All that and more at offshoreinsiders.com.